so much gets revealed to us when we make the space to get still. So much gets revealed to us when we make the space to create a boundary with our phones or to just limit all of the information that we're regularly processing. And being still and sitting with ourselves can be really tough.
Hello and welcome back to my podcast. Today's episode, we are going to talk about a topic that I get asked about a lot, which is meditation and also mental health. And I have the perfect guest to talk about this with. He is a public speaker, meditation teacher, and founder of The Big Quiet, which leads massive meditations, Mr. Jesse Israel.
Hi, Bea. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I'm super excited to just dive in. And I think, like I mentioned before, I like to start with people's background stories because I know that you didn't start off doing what you're doing now. You had a whole different life before.
Yep.
So what was that like?
Well, I was in a whole other career.
Mm-hmm.
Never in a million years thought that I would be doing meditation stuff. When I was a sophomore at NYU when I was 20, I started a little record label out of my dorm room with my sophomore roommate.
Mm-hmm.
And we lucked out. The first band that we started working with is a band called MGMT.
Mm-hmm.
And they wound up having a really big career. And by the time we were seniors at NYU, the band really took off. So when I was 23 and just graduated, I was really starting to finally kind of catch my groove with work. I'd just been full-time student while also being a full-time entrepreneur. And I started having panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't as much conversation around mental health. I'm 37 now, so this is a little while ago. There weren't as many conversations about mental health, so I didn't really know what was going on. Because according to what I always saw growing up in Los Angeles, being young and having a quickly growing business meant happiness. And there was a lot that I was grateful for, but internally I was a mess. And the panic, the anxiety, the stress that I was experiencing was really affecting my ability to show up and just to enjoy life. You know, it's like a lot of the stuff that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Wasn't sleeping, was getting sick almost every month. I had really bad social anxiety. I couldn't get excited when I was dating or when I was hooking up with people. I was just like flat all the time,
Mm-hmm.
in my head a lot, and didn't really feel much of a sense of connection or purpose around my work. So I would get home from this cool young, record label thing that I was doing, and I'd look at myself in the mirror and be like, this isn't right. Like this is not going to last long. So I realized I had to start to do something about it. And my dad, who is a Jewish man, but also loves Buddhism, recommended that I check out meditation as a way to see if it could help me bring some relief to some of the challenges I was experiencing. So I went to a little Zen Buddhist center in New York City and did like a 30-minute kind of free intro to meditation course and started practicing 3 minutes a day for about a month. Started to see benefits and realized that if I really gave myself, really committed to doing it regularly and slowly increased the amount of time, I had a feeling it would really help a lot. And just a few months in, I just found tremendous relief in my practice. And that, along with therapy and also medication, it's kind of the trifecta that helped me move out of this period. And in a relatively short period of time, I just started to feel like I came back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And was sleeping better, was not getting sick, was feeling a lot more confidence in myself, in my body, in my mind, and started to feel good about how I was showing up and started to enjoy my life more. And then my work started to really grow and expand, and my relationships started to grow and expand. And I realized that this was something that I wanted other people to know about. So I'd be at music festivals and I would introduce meditation to other music managers or other musicians. We'd be, backstage at Coachella meditating together while there's just all this chaos around us. And there was something really powerful about just sitting in stillness when there was mayhem occurring around.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that there was an opportunity to take some of what I had learned from being in the music biz and breaking bands and throwing concerts and being at festivals and apply that to meditation, to mindfulness, to stillness practice, and to community. So bringing those two worlds together and an interest in creating more access for meditation in community space is really what led me to getting the Big Quiet off the ground.
Amazing. I love that. I feel when you started to experience panic attacks, that's really relatable because I experienced something similar, and I've heard from other people too, is you go your whole life never experiencing a panic attack until you're an adult and you experience it and you don't know what's happening and you've never been educated on how to deal with that. And so when you started to incorporate meditation into your practice, how did your experience with the panic attacks change?
It started to shift pretty quickly. So what I've grown to understand is that when we experience a panic attack, it's high levels of anxiety that are building up in the system. And we reach a point where the stress level is so unbearable that the body starts to break down. It kind of goes into a red zone. And that's when the fight or flight response, the stress response in our system, goes into overdrive and essentially tells the body, you're going to die. And it's not true. It's almost never the case. Rarely are we actually having a panic attack when we're having a truly life-threatening experience. So most of the time, it's not actually the case. So when that's happening, it's terrifying. You know, I mean, you know the feeling. It feels like the world's going to end. I mean, it feels like there's a sense of doom. So when we start to practice meditation, or in my case, when I started to practice meditation, and it was meditation, it was therapy and medication. All these things really helped me, but meditation was the one that I found helped me the most. But as I started to bring some of these practices into my life, the things that were generating stress for me, right? The things that were happening in my world that would create the stress response in my system stopped creating as much of a stress response. So I could have the same rude email from a work colleague, but whereas before I was meditating, it would really affect me. Once I had a meditation practice going, I found that maybe it would give me like a little bit of a charge and then I'd be good. I found that instead of like reacting emotionally right away, I could take a moment to pause and sort of thoughtfully respond. So as I was practicing more regularly and as stressors in my life weren't triggering me as much, that meant that there was less stress in my system, less anxiety in my system. And with less stress and anxiety in the system, less likely to have panic attacks. So as the stress levels just started to go down by practicing regularly, I was further away from having panic attacks. And then every now and then, maybe something would really push it up. But ultimately, the progress that we make when we're daily meditators is that the stress levels really start to repair in our system and our bodies become better equipped with meeting the things that once created stress. So this is why daily meditation is such an important piece, as opposed to a meditation here or there, which might lower your stress for a second. The daily meditation really keeps the stress low. So I reached a point where panic attacks stopped happening.
Amazing. That's awesome. For people who have never meditated before and they want to create a practice, what's the best way to create a practice? Because I have a morning practice, but for some people, my clients have told me it's hard for them to get up in the morning or their mornings are really busy. So do you suggest meditation in the morning to be the most, the best for everybody, or is it different for everybody?
It's different for everybody, but what I see consistently is that morning practice is, we're most likely going to meditate if we do it first thing in the morning. If we are able to put our phones in airplane mode before we go to sleep, and when we wake up in the morning, we are not checking the phone in bed, but we're just waking up and letting our bodies kind of naturally adjust to the wake period. And we're keeping the phone on airplane mode for a little bit of time. This is an amazing foundation for meditation, right? So what most people do in 2022 is alarms on the phone goes off, grab the phone, look at it, see all the notifications. Suddenly we're in bed. We got work in bed with us. We got politics and news. We got social media updates. We got friends having new babies and new companies and this and all that stuff's right there with us. This is a very intense way to start the day. This is gonna begin the day in a fight or flight, like a stress response. We want to avoid this. If we're able to create a little bit of a morning boundary with the phone, even if it's just 20, 30 minutes without the phone, we create a great canvas for starting a clear day. And if that's the case, meditation is going to be that much easier to just sit up, do your practice.
Mm-hmm.
If that's for a few minutes, like I initially did when I first meditated, or if that's 20 minutes, which is what I now do every morning.
Mm-hmm.
So really making that intentional space and having some boundaries is a great way to start. And for me, I find that, and a lot of science will point to the way to build a new habit, like actually incorporate a habit that sticks,
Mm-hmm.
is by identifying something that already exists in your life, something that you're already doing on a daily basis, referred to as a cue,
Mm-hmm.
and attaching your new habit to that thing that's already happening every single day. So for me, every single day after I'd wake up, I'd use the bathroom. And when I would leave the bathroom, the second I would leave the bathroom, I would go sit on my couch and meditate. That was my cue, leaving the bathroom. So if someone is able to get clear about something that they're already doing every single morning that they can just attach a few minutes of meditation to afterwards, we're more likely to actually do that regularly. And then it takes about a month for it to start to stick.
Mm-hmm.
Because meditation is so valuable to the body, to the mind, our nervous systems, the body starts to remember that meditation's good for it, and it will start to crave it.
Mm-hmm.
So after anywhere from a week to maybe 4 weeks, the body will want the meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts to become less about, I got to get myself to sit down and meditate. Oh, that will still happen sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more about the body going, oh yeah, I want this thing. Just like the body wants sleep when we get tired at night.
Mm-hmm.
That will start to happen. But it's about really getting into a rhythm of letting that be the case so the body can see the benefit.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. I definitely experienced that when I first started my journey with meditation. It was a struggle to implement something that was different from my regular routine, but now it's something that if I don't do it, I
notice it.
Yeah, I notice it, and I really want to do it, and it is as rejuvenating as sleep, and it's just a part of my lifestyle. So airplane mode on the phone. So then I guess we would suggest to use like a different alarm clock, like an alarm clock with a button or something.
That's ideal. So I have an analog alarm clock. I got like a little sexy one from Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to continue to use your alarm on your phone or on your iPhone, that's totally fine. Just keep the thing in airplane mode.
Yeah.
Right. So when you check in the morning, there's not a bunch of stuff there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Keep that boundary, have a cue, go to your space where you meditate. And then a lot of people use apps. I use apps sometimes. Sometimes I just sit in the quiet. Sometimes I use music. Is there, for somebody who's a complete beginner, is there an ideal method to start? I mean, maybe guided meditations, I would assume. But
guided meditations are great to start.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, as long as there's some instruction happening, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody says, I think I'm just going to sit down and close my eyes and figure out meditation, that oftentimes leads to frustration, which will make someone think that meditation's not for them, or that they're, they can't meditate because their mind always wanders. So then they toss it.
Right.
And the reality is that the mind is going to wander.
Mm-hmm.
Living in the world that we live in today, our minds are going to wander. Also, our minds are designed to think. So there's this concept that thinking during meditation means that we're bad at meditation, or that meditation's not for us. But the reality is, it's like going to the gym and working out and, feeling your muscles get sore while you're working out and being like, oh, this doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
If we're just like expecting to feel nothing when we exercise. It's like expecting to sit down and not have thoughts when we meditate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a practice. And when we are thinking during meditation, the brain is actually unstressing. And science shows this. We're getting stress out of our system, even when we're having a thought-filled meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about meditation feeling quite rejuvenating like sleep. This is a big part of why that is. Because in the experience of releasing stress, we're replenishing the body with rest.
Mm-hmm.
And this turns off our body's fight or flight and gets us into a more balanced state. So we can experience this in a handful of different ways. If that's through a 5-minute guided meditation, using an app or a YouTube page, or if that's through actually learning how to meditate, taking a course. So we offer a course through the Big Quiet called the Big Quiet 101, where in 3 90-minute sessions, I teach people how to meditate on their own so they can have a self-sufficient practice and not have to rely on apps if they don't want to. But as long as there's some instruction there, guidance, or a teacher teaching someone how to practice, you're good to go. And what's so great is there's so much access to guided meditation right now. And so many of them are free that anybody can start and give it a shot.
Amazing. So that's super helpful, I think, for anybody watching or listening who doesn't know where to start, or also has that common misconception that if they're having a lot of thoughts, then it's not working or they're not doing it right.
It's the thing I hear most commonly.
Yeah, I bet. I've heard that a lot too. I want to go back to when you founded The Big Quiet because I love a good story of finding like new passions and then pursuing that because that's what I'm all about. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started so many different projects that are, nourish my soul. So, what did that feel like, or what was that transition like, going from working in the music industry to then starting Big Quiet?
I love this question. When I was doing my record label, and I mentioned I was in my 20s, so it was really like the only thing I had done before.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much reason to just keep doing it. Like from that logistical part of the brain, why would I not continue to run a record label and work with bands? And there was a lot of logistics around why it made sense to keep doing it. But my heart was falling out of love with it. And what was really challenging for me was to allow myself to trust that even though there was this really cool thing that I was so grateful to have created and been a part of, but wasn't speaking to me anymore. I was able to slowly trust that there was something else coming to life for me. Even though everyone I talked to would be like, why would you leave this cool label? Honestly, my meditation practice played a really big role in, I think, allowing me to hear that intuitive pull to follow something new. And also, I think it gave me the courage. I think my meditation practice gave me the courage to actually follow that. But it wasn't just like one day I was like, I'm leaving my record label. I'm going to go start doing mass meditations. That wasn't at all what it looked like. For me, it started with experiments. And this is what I love encouraging people to do who are thinking about transition or thinking about what their purpose might be or what a new purpose might look like. It's to experiment. So for me, I was running my label, but I was really feeling lonely living in New York City. And I would go to these concerts at these venues and everyone would be drunk and, kind of screaming along to lyrics. And I was always amazed by how nobody would talk to each other at concerts that they hadn't gone to the concert with. You're surrounded by humans, but nobody talks to each other unless you're there on a date or with your friends or whatever. So I was always really interested in how can, in a city like New York, where just walking to work, you pass by thousands of people and don't communicate with one of them. How can we create a little bit of permission for some connection? So while I was running my label, I started doing these experiments. I think I might have told you about my first one because I was a little nervous to tell you about it because it involves cheeseburgers. Did I tell you about the Burger Club? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
Oh, I did? Okay. So my first experiment was a burger club. It was me and it was 10 guys, and we were in our like mid-20s, and we went and we had cheeseburgers one day as a group. It wasn't a birthday. It was just an opportunity for us to come together. And we had a great burger. We had some beers. And then we started talking about real stuff. It was kind of like men's group, but disguised as like burger and beer time.
Yeah.
And it was so validating to have space to talk about the things we were going through as guys in their 20s, and it felt safe. So we decided that we would do it every other week. And for the next 2 years, we would go and have a different burger in the 5 boroughs in New York. We became the Burger Boys. We started getting invited to come to different restaurants. We had a burger blog and a whole thing like that. But really what it was space for brotherhood. It was there was camaraderie that was born, and we were getting vulnerable with each other and supporting each other in ways that we hadn't experienced before. And what really stood out to me was, wow, there's real power in, even if it's like a silly or funny thing, bringing people together with some sense of purpose. Now, with the Burger Boys, there was only 10 of us. You could only do it at a place where there was a restaurant with a table that was big enough. So I became really interested in how I could extend this experience of community and creating permission for community beyond a burger restaurant. So my next experiment was with bicycles and riding bikes. I loved riding bikes as a kid, and I loved riding bikes with friends. They're just the best to have the bike gang going. So I did an experiment where I reached out to, I think maybe like 15, 20 friends who had bicycles. And I said, hey, let's start a bike club. We're going to meet at the base of the Williamsburg Bridge, where I was living at the time. And we'll go for an adventure. I didn't tell anybody where we were going to go. It was just kind of a surprise destination. And I had about 15 friends show up. A lot of them didn't know each other, but they were excited to go on an adventure. And there was some of that nervousness of like, who are these people? Is it going to be awkward? Which I've grown to realize is a really important space for people to be in regularly, but we can talk more about that separately. We went on this ride. We went to the Cyclones roller coaster in Coney Island. And on the ride back to Williamsburg as the sun was setting, I was just looking around and people were just loving each other. There was that kind of like summer camp energy where you just feel like you've been through an experience with people and there's just that deeper connection. So we decided that we'd be a bike club and that every other week we would come together and ride bikes and anyone was welcome. And I'm talking like beach cruisers and slow riding, not like, speed road distance rides. And by the end of that summer, we had hundreds of people showing up on these rides.
Wow.
And we would take over 5-6 city blocks. And what was happening was that we would never say we were going to go. It was always a surprise. So people would show up. They, a lot of times we're talking, a Saturday morning or afternoon, people would have the choice to sleep in. Maybe they're partying the night before, they didn't want to do anything, or they'd be hungover, or get up, get on your bike, go be around people you don't know, go on a ride you don't know where it's going to be. There's kind of a big ask. Like that really takes people out of their comfort zone. So you'd have hundreds of people meeting up at the start of these bike rides, a little nervous. And then we would go on an adventure. And what would happen is people would bike next to other people and they would kick up a conversation. And next thing you know, people are starting businesses together. They're forming friendships. Tons of people have, I don't know about tons, but close to 10 people have gotten engaged that have met on these rides. A lot of hookups, right? A lot of new relationships born. It was just an opportunity to meet people outside of the usual ways that we're told to meet people. And it felt so good to create spaces like that. Meanwhile, I'm still running my record label, but I was finding that there was so much energy that I was bringing to life that I was feeling called to by doing these community experiments with the Burger Boys and with the Cyclones Bike Club. So when it became more and more clear that there was something else for me to start giving myself to outside of my record label, I already had a taste for community building and leadership and creating spaces for connection and joy. So I felt like I could step a little bit further into it by incorporating meditation into that same construct. And that's what it was. It was, I want to see if I can do this with meditation, right? It was getting too cold to ride bikes. It was the winter of 2015 in New York City. We couldn't ride bikes. So I was like, let me see if I can apply this to these people that I know from the music biz and the fashion space and the tech industry and my friends who were DJs or bartenders and come together and meditate, right? It was one thing to ride bikes or eat burgers, but would it be to just share silence together? So we did the first one in my buddy's loft in Soho, and it was really cool and kind of awkward to be sharing silence with people that I was used to just always kind of partying with or being at conferences or work stuff with. Suddenly we were just still. We had 20 people show up for the first one. And after we meditated and shared in that space, I started to share honestly and vulnerably about where I was at with my career and feeling called to what was next, not really knowing what the next thing was, feeling a lot of self-doubt as I was moving into thinking about what it meant to be Jesse that wasn't the record label Jesse. I was so hyper-identified with my work. And I really just kind of like opened it up to the group in a way that I never had. I remember people's faces because people saw me as, kind of a younger guy who had a successful record label. And there I was, talking about my relationship with anxiety and kind of fears of the unknown with my career. And all of a sudden, after I finished sharing, everybody else in the room who were also people that I had always looked up to were sharing the same stuff. They were sharing their own challenges or their own insecurities or the things that they were working through. And it was such a relief to be in a space where all these people that, maybe kind of like slightly envied each other, realized that we were all being human together, but never talking about it. It was so validating. And nobody wanted to leave that first meetup. And it was like a lightning bolt hit me at that first Medi Club gathering. I was like, this is what I meant to be doing next. I love gathering people. I love leadership. And I love teaching in ways that call for vulnerability. And I'd always kind of been like that on the side or with friends, or even how I led as a business person, but I never thought about it as a career. So I realized that I wanted to just keep experimenting. I had no idea what the business model was going to be. I just knew that there was a need. And this is, I think, so important when we're trying to get clear about purpose. What are the greatest needs of our time right now? And what are the things that light us up that can go and solve for those needs? And what I saw was that people were lonely as hell. People were yearning for deeper connection. People were sick of small talk and I think wanted to go to deeper places. And people were just overwhelmed and stressed out by the modern world. So this little gathering that happened that we all created together became a solution for those things. So when we decided that we would do it again 2 weeks later, everybody told their friends, just like with the bike club. And we had twice as many people show up. And by the 4th or 5th month, there were 100 plus people squeezing into my buddy's apartment to be a part of these gatherings. We weren't using social media or, it was a very word of mouth thing. But the reason why it was working and why it was spreading was because it was solving a need, and it was accessible for people. So that's ultimately those Medi Club meetups, which actually still happen to this day in New York City. Now it's a couple hundred people every month get together. But at the time, it was those gatherings that led to the idea of the Big Quiet. It led to this concept of, well, if this is something that is really clicking for people, right? These ingredients of quiet, vulnerable and honest conversation, and doing it in spaces that feel accessible and relatable and like culturally relevant. It wasn't just, within the context of a yoga studio or something that felt more wellnessy.
Right.
That we could take those ingredients and spread them with the city at large. And the Big Quiet was born to go and share that work. And then we started doing it with thousands of people.
Amazing. I like that you mentioned, when you're kind of listening to that soul yearning of shifting your path, it's finding the thing that the world is needing. Because there's something that we ourselves know that we need, that we're trying to give ourselves, or we find, and it feels really good when we give it to ourselves. And all of the other humans around us also need and are looking for that. Yeah. And when you can find that cross point, that's when you can find a really meaningful purpose that can also, turn into an entrepreneurial journey.
I think that's what you just said is so spot on. We are on this earth to be of use. And if we look at how we've existed as humans on this planet, arguably we've been around for around 1 million years. Some would say longer, some would say a little bit shorter, but the human species has been around for a while. And it's only been about 15,000 years where the majority of us have lived outside of tribes, maybe 12,000 years. But for hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million plus years, we as a species lived in tribes. And to live in a tribe, we needed to have some unique purpose that allowed us to give to the greater group, the greater good of the group. And because everybody showed up in the tribe with some sense of purpose and they were of some sense of use, the tribe could survive. If people stopped actually contributing and being useful, it could pose a threat to the entire well-being of the tribe. A lot of times people that weren't actually contributing or showing up in a meaningful way to the tribe would get the boot. And that would mean that they would die. Because if you weren't part of the tribe, you were getting eaten alive, which has a lot of ties to why it's so uncomfortable to not be liked in 2022.
Yeah.
We can relate to that feeling. But the reason why I bring that up is because we are wired to be of use. Our brain actually releases oxytocin, which is a feel-good chemical that gets released in our system. When we give to a group, when we contribute in a way that goes beyond just our own well-being. So we're designed to do this. But I think it's really easy in this day and age to not feel like we're needed, to not feel like we're of use, or to not feel that the ways that we show up or give ourselves to work or to relationships are being appreciated or felt. So when we can narrow in purpose about what you just said, how can I give myself to a need that the world has right now and figure out the things that really light me up, that allow me to serve and solve for that need. This is a very sustainable way. a very energizing way to give ourselves to work or to give ourselves to relationship, right? We can apply this to all sorts of different dynamics outside of work too. But what I find is that when we sync up on that, when we get clear about that, and especially when we can kind of unlearn what we think society tells us we're supposed to be doing and what our work or what our lives are supposed to look like, and instead make the compass be about how can I give myself to the things that are energizing, that serve the need. What starts to happen is the greater power supports that process. I believe that when we give ourselves to the need and we do it in a way that feels exciting and sustainable, we start to notice that more opportunities come in. We start to
100%.
see that business models come to life and relationships start to form. You've seen that too?
Yes, and it really has. It's something that completely changed my life, was making that realization that I wasn't living or I wasn't doing anything that was really giving me this like purpose, or that I wasn't serving or I wasn't helping or inspiring others. And this is like a little bit dark, but when I was 21, I was extremely suicidal, to the point that I called suicide hotline because I didn't have anybody else to support me in that moment. And the operator that I spoke to, at the time I was working at a marketing company and I hated my job. And that's actually when I started getting panic attacks, was working for that job. And I was, kind of like just being super vulnerable with this operator. And she told me, it sounds like you aren't living in your purpose. Maybe you should try finding something where you help people or where you're in service to others. And I really thought on it for a while, and she really, calmed me down and talked me off the ledge that day. And shortly after, I quit my job after just another couple series of events and panic attacks. And the panic attacks were telling me that this is not in alignment with what I'm supposed to do. And then I started training and I started coaching and I got my plant-based nutrition certification, and I started helping people, find health and get in tune with their body. And that was at the same time my spiritual journey began. And I also was just learning about meditation, and that was all kind of happening at once. But just making that shift, because when I was working at my marketing job, I just felt empty, and I was working for a company that sold cable. It's like a really popular cable company that everybody knows. I'm not going to say it though. And I just felt like a fraud because I didn't even watch TV, or I didn't believe that people needed this thing. And so it just felt extremely empty, and I felt really unaligned with my coworkers and my boss. And, like the transformation afterwards is getting to help people one-on-one or in groups get in tune with their body and feel healthy and feel confident in their skin. And that became so rewarding. And then, later on led me to starting Embodied Babe years later, which is a different type of coaching. And I mean, it's been completely, life-changing for me just to make that little click in there.
The thing that I want to acknowledge about your story is, and I would guess that a lot of listeners can relate to this too, is that it's so scary to think about making that shift, especially when so much of our culture says, keep the marketing job and keep the salary and keep the safety. And everybody has different financial situations, so that always is going to play a role in it. But the fact that you said, I'm going to take the leap and give myself to something that allows me to be of service and also lights me up, and I'm not totally sure what it's going to look like, but I'm going to go for it and find a way to explore that and experiment. And then boom, it's formed an incredible community, and you have offerings that are changing people's lives.
Yeah.
That leap of faith, moving into the unknown to pursue that, is so tough to do in this day and age. And it's also, I think, so important that we support each other in taking those leaps. Because for me, one of the things that's really stood out as I transitioned from the record label and this thing that was thought of as really sexy to, organizing group meditations, which I had my own kind of like ego issues around. It always felt really small and kind of soft and sort of weird for me to be doing it. It took me a while to kind of come to terms with it. But as I made that transition, one of the things that's really stood out to me is how isolating the process can be, how lonely the journey can be of pursuing an alternative career path. And I have so much respect for people that are taking that or thinking about taking that step, because we need more people in their power doing work that is of use and serving the needs. But it's a tough journey. It can feel like it's a really scary journey because it's so easy to feel like we're doing it by ourselves. And then we go online or we go on social media and we just see the highlight reels of everybody else who's doing it. And we just feel like we're so far away from being able to achieve that. Will I ever be able to achieve that? And it's easy to get stuck. So for the listeners that are going through it or have gone through it, I just want to shout them out, because that work is so needed right now. We only get one life in this body. So if we can, we might as well go for it.
Yeah. And in that journey of taking that leap and following whatever that entrepreneurial dream is for you, even though it's maybe not as, it doesn't seem as like juicy as the nice paying job that you have, or the thing that seems cool that everybody or your parents praise you for, in that journey of leaving that one thing to follow your heart's calling. I mean, so much spiritual growth happens because, like you said, it's kind of humbling your ego to say, okay, well, maybe this thing isn't going to make me as much money right now, or it doesn't seem as cool, or I suddenly am not seeing the friends that I was hanging out with, and I'm going through all these life changes, and you go through that kind of, dark night of the soul experience, but when you come out the other side, you are living your soul's purpose. You're doing something that's meaningful, that you're excited about, that you're passionate about, and you have so much growth and so many new tools in your tool belt.
Right. Yeah. Beautifully said. And when it comes to this concept of giving ourselves to purpose, I remember hearing a conversation like this when I was much younger and being like, I don't think I know what my purpose is, and feeling almost like a sense of pressure around needing to know my purpose. And something that I always like to bring up when the conversation of purpose comes to light is that figuring out the purpose or identifying what that purpose looks like is something that can take time. And that I think that there's a tendency in the wellness space to be able to say in a couple clear words in one sentence, this is what your purpose is. And it's great when we're able to do that, or those that are able to do that can do that. But I also think it's important to make space for people who are very much in the process around it, because there are periods in our lives where our purpose, I believe, is getting clear about what the purpose is.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important thing to lean into and to celebrate. To not know, but to be in discovery of it is really valuable. In a society that says, or at least in a wellness space that says, you need to know your purpose. And for me, the things that have really helped me get more clear about my purpose, and I've had periods, even since I've been doing this work, where I've disconnected from it and where I've needed to kind of be in process around getting clear on what that purpose is. But for me, it always comes back to, what are the things that we do that feel most energizing? What's the work or the ways that we give ourselves to other things outside of ourselves that feel fulfilling? And if we can get clear about what those things are and start to prioritize, if it's through experiments, if it's through friends, if there's ways to incorporate it into work, but giving ourselves more to those things that are energizing and those things that are fulfilling, that a lot of the mystery of the purpose starts to become clear as we prioritize that.
Yes. And I've also found that it can be very multifaceted as well.
Yeah.
And I think that knowing that can be really assuring as well, because I feel like also in the wellness space or just in the entrepreneurial space, it's like, I do this thing and I'm really good at it and that's what I'm known for. And that's awesome if that's you, but you can also be good at that thing and like to do this other thing and this other thing. Like I do a bunch of different things and I'm still discovering more things that I want to shift into.
Right.
And I think I've seen that with my clients a lot of the time, is that they feel the pressure to be boxed in, especially on social media. You always hear like, find your niche, like you need to know your niche to let people know what you do. And it's good if you are in a niche. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's also okay to be in discovery and also say, okay, I like this and I'm good at this and people need this. And I also like this and I think people need this too. And then just kind of follow it and see what unfolds.
Yeah. I think that this giving ourselves permission
Mm.
to really follow what feels good to us in our bodies, what feels expansive and exciting, is such an important and critical solution to so much of the self-suffering that we experience around purpose, around work, around how we spend our time. I think we have so much of the answers within us just by listening to how things feel in our body. But what's really challenging about honoring that is what our society tells us we're supposed to do and not do.
Mhm.
Or in the case that you just brought up, I see this a lot with Instagram. Instagram says you need to do it this way to be successful.
Mhm.
You need to have your niche down. You need to post 4 reels a day. You need to be checking this much and engaging with your comments this much, right? There are these systems that get put in place where we feel like, well, if we're not doing it the way that we're told we're supposed to, then there's something wrong with us, or we're not going to be as successful, or this or that. And it's about finding a balance. But ultimately, I think it's so important that we make space for us to also do things the way that in ways that feel authentic, in ways that light us up, and that we celebrate that, and we celebrate when things look different than the ways we think they're supposed to be. This is really important, I think, right, especially right now, because we need new leadership, we need new ideas, we need new concepts around how to create and build in the world.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, it brings it back to meditation, because in that consistent practice of stillness with yourself, you get more and more clear
Yeah.
on all of these things. And that's something that has really transformed, particularly the last 2 years for me, is my, building my practice of stillness. And it's allowed me to really get honest with myself and see, okay, this thing that I'm doing isn't actually fulfilling me. And now I can really see it and I can hear it because I sit with myself every day. And so it allows me to then lean into being authentic and listening to that soul calling more and more.
Well, what's I think really interesting and powerful about what you just said is so much gets revealed to us when we make the space to get still. So much gets revealed to us when we make the space to create a boundary with our phones, or to just limit all of the information that we're regularly processing. And being still and sitting with ourselves can be really tough. It can be really scary to just be with our own thoughts, or with our own emotions, or with our own experiences, or trauma, or whatever it might be. So this thing that can feel so scary and challenging, and that I think so many of us do whatever we can to distract ourselves away from, is also a key to so much inner wisdom. But if it was easy, I think it would be, and I wish it was, but everybody would be doing it. Everybody would have access to this type of clarity. But this is why it's a practice. This is why sitting down to meditate and learning a practice and being with the thoughts and allowing for all the stuff that comes up is a practice, because through the practice of it, there's so much insight and there's so much healing inside. But it's a not easy thing to do, especially in 2022.
Just like working out, I
Right.
always compare it to working out. It's like everybody has the availability to do it in some way, but not everybody does it because it's not easy.
Right.
And even if you start it, then it's about being consistent with it. Or if you fall off consistency, to get back on it and to keep going. And I think that building that resilience to just trust yourself, to continue to show up for yourself every day, because the benefits of it are just, endless, physically, mentally, spiritually, and seeing what comes up and how you end up making different choices in your life.
Totally. And this is why I always encourage people when they're beginning a practice, or they're having trouble with their practice, meditation practice, to be easy on themselves. It's such an accomplishment just to sit down and sit with thoughts, or to just sit down and be without distraction. I have so much respect for anybody that is practicing stillness, in this day and age where it's just so rare to be quiet. So I always encourage people to be easy with themselves, to be patient, to understand that, we're going to have days where we're going to miss. We're going to have days where it's really uncomfortable, and all we want to do is open our eyes and not meditate anymore. And that this is such an important part of building that practice. And the way we get rewarded when we sit with it and we continue is with the type of insight that we're talking about, and the type of benefit that it brings our body and mind.
Yeah. Well, I love this conversation.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Where can everybody find your stuff? Do you have anything coming up with Big Quiet or anything exciting you want to share?
Yeah. So we offer Big Quiet courses. So it's called the Big Quiet 101 meditation courses for people that want to learn how to meditate and really have a strong understanding of how they can have a practice on their own without relying on apps or YouTube videos, stuff like that. So for people who want to go deep with meditation, check out the Big Quiet 101 course. You can learn about it through the Big Quiet's website, bigquiet.com, also our Instagram, the Big Quiet. We do mass meditation events, and we're going on tour later this fall. So we're going to be going
Sweet.
to a bunch of cities throughout North America where we're going to be gathering huge groups of people to meditate, which would be really cool. So look out for that. And then people can follow me, my Instagram at Jesse Israel.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. I know it's going to inspire people to get out there and meditate and hopefully to listen to that soul calling if they're not feeling fully satisfied in where they're at. And make sure that you give him a follow. Check out the Big Quiet. And if you love this episode, leave a like and a comment. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell. And if you really love this episode, I appreciate it if you share it on social media and tag me. And as always, sending you so much love and light. Peace.